Hey there, and welcome to the Food as Medicine Show with Dr. Ann, the place to be for real talk with real people and real results so you can heal yourself naturally. I'm your host, Dr. Ann, and I'm a board-certified pharmacist and health coach specializing in treating cholesterol without medications. You can learn more about me at drann.com, spelled A-N-H as in heart. I always spell it out because people usually forget the silent H at the end, and I want you to be able to find me. And I'm also hoping by episode 30 that I won't have to spell it out anymore because I'm running out of words that start with H. Today, I want to give a big shout out to Jory Holness, Ani D, Chris at AW, Shaolin Soprano, awesome name by the way, and Nick at 5 Minutes with Dad for leaving a review of the Food as Medicine Show. Your listens and your reviews matter because that's what helps boost us in the rankings and helps more people find the show so that they can hear the Food as Medicine message. We sincerely appreciate the feedback and appreciate you for tuning in. Remember to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. After today's episode, take a minute to leave a review in iTunes by searching for the Food as Medicine Show. Let us know what you think and tell us where you're from so we can give you a shout out. 1 or 2 sentences will do, and it will help us improve the show. I want to let you know that the opinions expressed on this show may not represent my opinions, and the show is for general information only, not a substitute for medical care. So prior to beginning any new health program, I recommend you consult with a qualified health professional. In today's episode, I chat with Mira Dessy from thepantryprinciple.net, who went from being diagnosed with IBS, living on the sofa, and not being able to walk up a flight of stairs without lying down at the top stair, to today where she no longer feels achy, doesn't have any bloating or GI distress, and has no more rashes or sinus infections, simply by, well, you guessed it, changing her diet. In today's episode, Mira and I talk about the top 3 things that she removed from her diet that helped her improve her symptoms, how to read a food label to know what to eat and what to avoid, how certain ingredients are hidden by giving them different names, the funny math that occurs on the food label and what to watch out for, the importance of voting with your wallet, and much, much more. All right, let's go chat with Mira. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Food as Medicine Show with Dr. Ann. And today we have a special guest. Her name is Mira Dessy. And Mira is a certified nutrition educator and a real food advocate who emphasizes a healthy lifestyle and eating whole foods. She speaks frequently to lay people and nutrition professionals on how to navigate the grocery stores, packaged food stock, and decipher confusing food labels, and also choose healthy convenience food. And her motto is eat well to be well. So welcome, Mira, to the show.
Hi, Ann. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come on. Now, I know you have a little bit of a story of how you use food as medicine, so if you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience your journey.
Sure. It started a number of years ago. I had been, as it turns out, misdiagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome for a number of years. And I just started getting sicker and sicker. I had more and more digestive distress. And I also began physically to have issues. And as I got sicker and sicker, I wound up seeing more and more doctors. And I was put on more and more medication. And it got to the point where, at my lowest point, I was living on my sofa. I had maybe an hour to an hour and a half a day where I could function. And I was trying to raise 3 kids and run a household and work and all of that. It was really very overwhelming. And the final straw for me came, there were 2 events that happened pretty much close to each other. One was my rheumatologist said, I'd really like to put you on this medication, but I don't think your endocrinologist would like it, so I'm not going to do it. And that was very upsetting to me because my thought, of course, was, well, if you want to, why don't you just pick up the phone and talk to her? And then the next doctor that I saw a few days later looked at me and said, well, Mrs. Dessy, you are getting older. Mm-hmm. And I was 42 years old. And I thought, oh, what?
I'm not old.
I'm not old. And I don't want to live on the sofa for the rest of my life. So I got really angry, and I called my insurance company, and I yelled at the poor woman on the other end of the phone, and I still feel bad about that. And she essentially offered me an executive checkup at a major hospital. I took it and I went, and I was able to see a lot of different doctors, but the most important thing that came out of it was a commitment to being an active participant in my own health care and to looking for answers that would be important to finding out what was going on and what I needed to do without this chemical cocktail that I was living in. So as I began to research what was going on, I began to realize that it wasn't just what I was eating, it was what was in what I was eating. And all of the chemicals, the hormones, the antibiotics, the preservatives, all of these things that were in the food were making me sick. And I needed to change that. And so I embarked on a quest to clean up my diet and that of my family. And the more I got into this, the more I realized I needed to know. I eventually went back to school and became a certified nutrition educator, and now I help other people clean up the chemicals in their diet.
So how do you feel now?
I feel great, actually. It's kind of funny when I tell this story to people who meet me in person, they look at me and they're like, really? Like, you lived on the sofa? I mean, I was so sick, I could not walk up a flight of stairs without lying down on the top stair, even if I was going to bed. And so people look at me and they're astounded. They're like, how'd you do that? And it's the food. You know, I made major changes. And I will also share that I think a large part of it was the education process, because so much of what's in our food is hidden and we're not really aware of it. And that's something that is really important as well.
So you said that you cleaned up your diet and you felt a whole lot better. Can you just tell us, like, what cleared up for you? You know, what symptoms? What was it like? You know, after everything just got better.
Well, I knocked out things like foods that had antibiotics in them and artificial colors, preservatives, those kinds of things. I no longer feel achy. I used to ache all the time. I no longer have the bloating and gastric distress that I had, and I've learned there are certain things that are in our food that can do that. I discovered, I did not even know this, I had rashes that I had just had almost all of my life and never thought twice about. I don't have those anymore. And it was because it was my body's reaction to some of what I was eating. I also reliably got sinus infections on a regular basis, and I believe that part of the reason that happened was because I was under this allergic assault, and that was part of how my body responded, and I was just producing so much mucus that it would back up and clog my sinuses. When I work with people, with my clients, I have amazing stories, people whose eczema has gone away, people who have stopped having migraine headaches, people who all of a sudden are sleeping better, and the biggest single change that they've all made is to change their diet.
So what are those changes that you recommend your clients do, and what did you do? I know you mentioned about removing foods that had antibiotics, but what specific foods?
Well, the big challenge is there's so much. This is a huge topic. It's so big that I wrote a book on it. And so it's not. You can
probably write more books on it.
I can actually. I'm researching the next one now. But yeah, so my book is called The Pantry Principle: How to Read the Label and Understand What's Really in Your Food. And that's the most important thing you can do. Read the label and learn to understand what's in your food. It's essentially a matter of making choices, but you have to do it in a step-by-step fashion. This is not something, it took me a long time to get healthy. It takes a commitment on the part of people who want to make these changes for it to happen. It's not something that a week later, oh, there you go, we're good now. You do a little bit at a time. So the most common source, to come back to your question, of hormones, was it hormones or antibiotics that you asked about?
Antibiotics, but really all food. What foods did you remove and that you recommend people remove?
Sure. So the antibiotics is huge, and that is found predominantly in animal products, so meat and dairy products, those kinds of things. And it's a startling fact to realize that 70% of the antibiotics currently in use in this country are not given to people. Mm-hmm. They're given to animals. And it's for two reasons. One is because so many of these animals are grown in these tight, confined feeding operations, and they get sick. So in order to prevent that, they're given medication before they get sick. The other side effect that food producers discovered is that giving them these doses of antibiotic makes them get fat faster. So they come to market weight sooner, so they're more profitable because they can then be processed quicker. I think if you had to ask me what the top 3 things are that I ask people to remove from their diet, a great place to start, because it's pretty easy, is artificial colors. And for that, you look at the label. Somewhere near the bottom, it will say a color and a number. And nature does not grow food by numbers, so we know that we don't need that. And the other thing that's really huge, which is easy to get rid of from reading the label, is high fructose corn syrup. And part of the reason we want to get rid of high fructose corn syrup is that it's very, very bad for your liver. And it can overwhelm it. There is a condition called fatty liver disease, and high fructose corn syrup is responsible for the majority of those cases. It's also responsible for a lot of weight gain. Your liver is the only organ in your body that can process fructose. So when you take in high fructose corn syrup, if you take in too much, your body goes, oh, I need to save this for later. And it shunts it over into adipose or fatty tissue. The third thing that I encourage people to get rid of is a little bit harder. It's monosodium glutamate, MSG. And MSG by itself obviously is easy to find on the label. The challenge for most people is that it actually hides under a startling array of different names. And so learning what those names are and how to get rid of them is difficult. I often ask people to start with anything that says glutamate, anything that says hydrolyzed, and anything that says autolyzed. And that is responsible for the vast majority of it. Once you've mastered those, you can move on to the other names for it.
Yeah, I was shocked, actually, when I looked at the back of one of my favorite brands of chicken bouillon, and it's better than bouillon. A chef who was teaching a cooking class recommended it to me because she said, oh, it's got great flavor, and I loved the product. And then I looked on the back, and lo and behold, it had hydrolyzed yeast. Yeah. And oh, it sounds so nice, right? Hydrolyzed yeast, and it's like you said, it's just another name for MSG.
And what most people don't realize is MSG can trigger headaches and rashes and all kinds of bodily issues, but because we take it in such low doses and because it's not, in Chinese food anymore for the most part, a lot of people don't realize how much they're getting and how overwhelming it is until they try to remove it from their diet. Mm. So, you mentioned briefly about the coloring. Why is that a problem aside from it's not natural? Like, is there a specific effect on the body? There is actually. First of all, just from a disgusting point of view, artificial colors are made from petrochemicals. And so that is just not very appealing. I fill my car at the gas pump, not my body. But one of the challenges is, especially for people who have attention-related disorders, artificial colors are known to exacerbate that. There was a huge landmark study that was done in 2007 by the University of Southampton that looked at the effect of artificial colors and benzoates on small children, and they discovered that it really did cause hyperactivity and inattention and all of these other issues for children with those conditions. Startlingly enough, it even caused it for children without that, just not at the same level. Wow. So it was really overwhelming.
So then you talked about, okay, you explored all this. You're like, I have to write a book, so you wrote The Pantry Principle. What are some of the key things that you teach people when they're looking at the food label?
Well, obviously, first of all, to read the label. um, Many people are misled by the front of the box. Manufacturers rely on that because we're in that grocery store. We want to get in, get out as fast as we can. We don't want to stop and read all those labels. And so they put all kinds of colorful packaging, and they use buzzwords and key concepts to try and convince us to use the front of the package as our purchasing vehicle instead of flipping that box over. So we really need to take the time to look at the label, to look at what's on there. And then there are a few simple rules that people can keep in mind when they're shopping at the grocery store that will help them. So one of them, for example, is if it has a number, don't eat it. And that would include not only the artificial colors, but there are certain preservatives and things such as polysorbate 80, etc., that have numbers in them. Now, for people who live in Europe, it's a little bit different because a lot of their food has numbers. They use E numbers, and so they have to learn specifically which E numbers are good and which ones aren't. But here in the U.S., we don't do that. We tend to use words for our food.
I do have some listeners actually over in Europe. So what are some examples of E numbers that...
It's funny you should ask that because I don't normally know those by hand, but I have my copy of the book. Right? So I'm going to look that up and I will be able to tell you. While I'm looking it up, I should also mention that anytime we see food that is all capital letters, we don't want that either because that is just an abbreviation for chemicals. They've shortened it. For example, BHA stands for butylated hydroxyanisole. Doesn't that sound yummy? So anytime we see that conglomeration of just all capital letters, we don't want to eat that. So some of the E numbers that your viewers overseas would want to know about, for example, sorbates are 200, 201, 202, 203. And sorbates are not beneficial for us. They can cause rashes, they can cause joint issues, they can cause other problems. The colors, the artificial colors, and see, this is why it's challenging. In my book, I've actually reprinted, and I don't know if you can see it here, I'm trying to do this. This is a sheet that was put together by a woman named Sue Dengate, who runs the Failsafe food group in Australia. And it avoids all the additives. It lists them by name as well as by E number. It's a little wallet card. You can cut it out, print it out, and take it with you. So the artificial colors are, you ready? 102, 104, 110, 122, 123, 124, 127, 129. Keep going. 132, 133, 142, 143, 151, and 155. So to remember all of them is quite a bit of work.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You know, it's just everywhere.
It is.
And how they try to hide it. So, you know, I've heard some people say if it comes with a food label, you really just shouldn't eat it. You know, if there's a barcode, you shouldn't eat it. You know, you should just really look for something that has a single ingredient. What's your philosophy on that?
I find that to be a very limiting, actually. It's really hard. First of all, we live in a modern world, and, you know, to be able to eat single ingredient foods is a challenge, especially given how many people spend so many hours at the office or whatever. The important thing, to my mind, is to know what you're eating and to make educated, intelligent decisions about your food. The other challenge is single ingredient foods by themselves are not necessarily okay either, as we have, for example, genetically modified foods. So corn is one of the most highly genetically modified foods out there, and you want to purchase organic corn if you can. There are other foods which are known to be highly contaminated by pesticides, such as apples and peaches and strawberries. There's a list of them. It's called the Dirty Dozen. And so those are foods you want to purchase organic. Dairy products, well, if it's milk or cheese or whatever, we tend to think of that as a single item food, but it could have antibiotics and growth hormones and other things in it. So we really have to kind of go beyond that to look at what's in the food, regardless of whether it's packaged or a single food item.
Sure, that makes sense. So then, okay, going back to the food label, can we trust everything that's on the label? You know, is everything required to be labeled?
Yeah, sadly, no. You know, it's kind of hard. Part of it is that there is some manipulation and some deception that goes on the food label. One of my favorites is what I call funny math. And when we look at the label, we've all learned that trans fats are bad for us. And as a matter of fact, a short while ago, the United States FDA ruled that trans fats are no longer generally recognized as safe. They're going to investigate them and see if it needs to be removed as an allowable ingredient in the food supply.
It's about time.
Yeah, exactly, because they are bad for us. They're known to cause problems with cardiovascular health, and they're just generally not a good idea to have in our food. However, when we look at the food label, if you see trans fats equals 0, you can't trust that. You have to look down at the ingredients list and make sure that there are no hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated foods. Because if it says hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated in those ingredients, there are trans fats present in that food. However, if it is less than 0.5 gram per serving, and we'll come back to that in just a second, they're allowed to say there's none in there. So they can say it's 0 even if it's in the food. Here's where that gets really messy. The serving size is determined by the manufacturer. So let's say you want to have a cookie. The box says the serving size is 2 cookies. How many people eat just 2 cookies? Or it's 14 potato chips. How many people count their potato chips? They don't. And so if you eat more than a serving size, if you eat a portion, whatever that is for you, you could potentially be consuming more, and that then can add up. Plus, if you have several foods over the course of a day that all supposedly have 0 trans fats, even if you ate only the serving, let's say you had 5 of them, you're looking at over 2 grams of trans fats in your diet. And so it adds up pretty quickly. The other thing that they do is they hide things by giving them different names so that people won't necessarily pay attention to it. So we were just talking about MSG. One of the common ways they can hide MSG is by calling it natural flavors. Now, it doesn't mean that all natural flavors are MSG, but it's a possibility. Some of those natural flavors may also come from other sources that are not whole food sources, that are animal sourced. We also have colors that are put in there. If it says, you know, natural color, it could be from bugs. So there are a lot of different ways. Yeah, I know. We could talk about bugs if you want. There's a whole bunch of bug stuff in our food. You know, and it's just a way for them to manipulate what's in there so that people don't see it, so that they don't pay attention.
So let's talk about bugs. What's like the most surprising food item that contains bug ingredients in it?
Well, I guess what I would say is shellac. And that is...
That's a nail polish.
Well, we would know, but it's actually in food. It's called confectioner's glaze. And it's on things like candy corn and malted balls and jelly beans. And, yeah. And essentially, there's this little bug that lives in Indonesia, and it's called a lac bug, and it extrudes this sticky, sappy stuff, and eventually, when that gets harvested, they scrape it off the tree, along with any dead bugs that happen to be stuck in there, and they boil it, and they strain it, and they then use it to glaze food. So that's kind of surprising. The other one is cochineal, which is a beetle, and they crush it, and it makes a red color. And that's actually found not only in food but also in some cosmetics. And that is known to can cause some very serious allergic reactions to people who are sensitive to it. As an interesting side note, at one point Starbucks tried to switch in their strawberry frappuccinos from using a vegetable-based dye to using cochineal. And a number of people found out about it and raised a hue and a cry, because for anybody who is a vegetarian or people who eat kosher, they don't eat bugs. And so there was enough of a ruckus that in very short order, Starbucks went back to using a vegetable color source.
Yeah, I remember reading something about that.
Yeah.
Well, so, I mean, how do you even know that your food products have bug pieces in it? You don't.
Well, the bug pieces is the government allows a certain amount of bug parts per million, and that's just, there's nothing we can really do about that. You don't see them, and you don't really know they're there. You're just trusting that it's not more than the allowable amount. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the use of bugs as an ingredient in food. So, for example, those kinds of things are what you need to learn about a little bit at a time. I generally encourage people to figure out what's important to them. If your fat sources are important to you and you want to make sure you're eating healthy fats, learn about those. Understand what the different fat sources are and how you want to make those changes, and then move on to something else. If it's that you want to get rid of MSG, figure out what all those names are, begin to incorporate that change. Every single change that you're making is one more thing than you were doing before. So it's all adding up. It just takes time. And so we have to be patient and just keep working at it.
Solid advice. So you touched a little bit about governmental regulation, and they say X amount parts per million or billion is going to be considered safe. Can we really trust that the government is regulating the food industry and for our benefit?
Well, at a certain point we don't really have a choice. I think what we need to do is look at those things that we can control and those places where we can make a difference. But there are some people who go out and they raise all their own food and they process all of their own food and they do all of that, and that's great. And I'm really happy for them, but the truth of the matter is I don't have time for that. And so I need to make the best choices that I can for myself and my family, and to teach other people how to do the same so that we can affect change. So one of the big ways that we can do that, people don't realize this, voting with our wallet is so powerful. When high fructose corn syrup first came on the market to public attention and people began to complain about it, there were all those silly little ads. I'm sure we remember, oh, I've got an extra popsicle, want one? Doesn't it have high fructose corn syrup? Well, what's so bad about that? And then the other person's left going, and they look silly. And the truth of the matter is, we know it's bad for you, and we know it's not healthy. The manufacturer tried very hard to make it go away by putting this media spin on it. When that didn't work, they tried to change the name. There was actually a petition to change the name to corn sugars, because they thought that would be seen in a more positive light. That request was turned down because the FDA said there was no substantive reason for that to happen. And so now, when we go to the grocery store, we see a growing number of products that on the front of the package say, no HFCS. So they're making more and more things that don't have it because enough people have said, I'm not going to buy that anymore. When I don't know what grocery stores are like where you are, but where I am here in Texas, a number of years ago, it was really hard to find anything more than organic apples. And now, half of the grocery store produce section is all organic, and they have big green signs that say, this is the organic section, and they've got everything And that's great, because for those foods that I want to eat organic, I now know that I can get them very easily. But it took enough people being willing to make that change for the grocery store to invest in it and for the producer to provide it.
I love it. I am totally a fan of voting with your wallet. And, when you have to make budgetary decisions, what do you recommend people do? Do they always buy organic? What are the best things to buy organic?
Well, I think it is all a matter of making decisions. I'm going to say that for me, the top item to purchase organic, if you can afford it, is dairy. And that's because of the added hormones that are put in there. If your budget goes more than that, then it would be dairy and animal products. So that would be your meats. And then after that, we look at adding in the dirty dozen. And that's those fruits and vegetables that are most likely to be contaminated by pesticides. And then we start looking at genetically modified foods. And for other people, it may be, a different choice. They may say, I really care about the genetically modified foods, so that's going to be my top priority. But those are the three areas, basically animal products, the dirty dozen, and GMOs. And if you do just a little bit at a time, you eventually find more and more room somehow in the budget to make more and more of those changes. But it's also important to note that the prices come down. When I first started buying organic milk, I am going to share my husband had a conniption fit. It was $8 a gallon back then.
Wow.
We had 3 little girls, and they drank a lot of milk. And he wasn't a very happy camper. And then from milk, we branched out to all the dairy products, yogurt and cheese and cottage cheese and sour cream. And I mean, it really added up. However, the difference now between a standard gallon of milk and an organic gallon of milk is not nearly as much as it was back then, because enough people are purchasing it that it becomes more and more available.
So let's talk about organic milk. Are you talking about just milk that has been produced by cows that haven't been given growth hormones, or are you talking about like raw milk that's not been pasteurized from a grass-fed cow?
Sure. When I say organic milk, I am talking about milk where the cow has not been given growth hormones and has not been given food that is genetically modified or food that has been treated with pesticides and also has not been given antibiotics.
So how do you know that's what it contains when you read the label?
There are government standards for that, and there are supposed to be investigations into that. And I will say that although there certainly are maybe not enough people sometimes to monitor the food supply, when there are gaps in the organic system and people find out about it, it happens really quickly and it comes to attention really quickly. So there have in the past been some big cases where companies have been caught not doing what they were supposed to do, and there have been fines and public, knowledge and everything else. So I do, at this point, feel that the organic label is strong enough because of the regulations. However, I will also say there are a lot of conventional growers that keep trying to chip away at that conventional label, at that organic label, and bring it more in line with conventional standards because it's easier for them and it's more profitable for them.
Interesting. Yeah. So, well, okay, I'm still unclear. Okay, if someone is wanting to buy organic milk, what are they looking for on the label?
They're just looking for, it says organic. Okay. So there are several different categories for milk. There's conventional milk, which is, milk. There's organic milk, which has organic on the label and encompasses all those things that we just talked about. And then there's also milk, which is, if you look at the bottom, somewhere near the bottom is a little paragraph that says something along the lines of the federal government has determined that there is no difference in products from cows treated with RBST and cows not treated. Mm-hmm. And that is cows that are not given the hormone. They may still potentially be eating genetically modified feed that is pesticide laden and they are given antibiotics.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth category, which you alluded to a moment ago, is raw milk. So raw milk essentially comes straight from the cow. In some states, it is not legal. In other states, it is limited to buying clubs where you must purchase it direct from the farmer. You have to participate in a co-op, essentially. And those cows, to the best of my knowledge, I have never heard of anybody who's selling raw milk who gives their cows hormones or antibiotics or pesticides or anything else. So and those cows are often grass-fed. And grass-fed milk is the best.
So for your family, you choose to buy the ones that are labeled organic milk.
Well, we actually drink both. We have organic dairy products in the house, and we also have raw milk in the house.
Gotcha. Okay. Perfect. So going back to, reading labels, right? What are some of the most shocking things when you tell people, oh, let's start reading the labels? What are the most shocking things people find and the most common things people find?
Well, the most common, of course, are things like the colors. And actually, that's always pretty funny to me because people think they're eating food that may not have color in it because it doesn't look like it's colored. And then they read the label and they go, what? Pickles is a big example. And a lot of people go, there are no colors in pickles. And the answer is, yes, there are. It doesn't look like it's colored. Well, no, maybe it doesn't, but there are. The good news is, if you like pickles and you want pickles that don't have artificial colors in them, you can go to the international food aisle in your grocery store, and a lot of times they will have pickles from other countries where they don't use artificial colors. So that's sort of a little workaround there. Some of the startling things that are in there, I think a lot of people are very stunned when they begin to read the label to discover just how much sugar is in our food. A lot. And they do it for a couple different reasons. One is because we are biologically programmed to think that sugar tastes good, and so we'll think their product tastes good. The other is that if they ratchet up the amount of sugar that's in there, then it becomes almost addictive. Like we want more of it because that one tastes better because it has more sugar. So it's sort of a self-perpetuating cycle there. And so one of the things that they do is frequently they'll break up the sugars so that I'm sure everybody knows that the more of an ingredient that's in a food by volume, the higher it is on the ingredients list. Mm-hmm. So if they were to put sugar in there, it might be number one on the list. But if instead they say that it is, sugar and molasses and maltodextrin and some brown rice syrup, they can scatter those in the food in varying amounts, and so all of a sudden, even though there's 4 sugars in the food, they're scattered throughout, and maybe sugar is only the 5th ingredient. So people go, oh, that's not so bad. But when you then look at the sugar grams on the label, you realize that seems like an awful lot of sugar for what's really in there. Mm-hmm. The one area where it's a little tricky is dairy products, because milk does contain a natural sugar called lactose, and so we kind of have to think about that intelligently when we're making those decisions. But for other things, like that's really startling to a lot of people. And then the other thing that I think really surprises people when they're reading the label for the first time is how many words they might not be able to pronounce.
So do you subscribe to that philosophy? If you can't pronounce it, don't buy it?
Yep. If you can't pronounce it or you got to look it up in a dictionary, you probably don't want to eat it. Now, I will say there are some exceptions to that. For example, when acai first hit the market, acai berries are a superfood. Mm-hmm. Who knew how to pronounce it? And what was that funny little thing under the sea? And it just wasn't something that's very comfortable. So we're like, all right, but now we all know what it is. We know it's a berry. We know it's a superfood, high in antioxidants, that kind of thing. Quinoa, that's another thing. Many people, when they first saw quinoa, a lot of people were like, quinoa, what is that?
Yep.
Now we know what it is. So there are some whole foods or whole ingredients that we have to learn what they are because they come from somewhere else. But when it's a gobbledygook collection of chemical, words, we don't want to eat it.
Yeah. So now, I guess one last question I have for you is, you're looking at the label. How do you know something is something you can buy? What are some healthy convenience foods that you are, your go-to grab and go type of things?
Well, and see, that's a tricky question because it's going to be different for everybody. It depends on what it is that you like to eat. So essentially, I'm going to ask people to figure out, the simple rules are if it has a number, don't eat it. If it's all capital letters, don't eat it. If you don't know what it is, don't eat it. If it ends in ATE, don't eat it, or at least think about it. There are some foods that end in ATE, like pomegranate. We know what those are, they're safe, but sorbates are not a good choice, so those kinds of things. If it has too many syllables, you don't want to eat it either, because real food does not have 6, 7, 10 syllables to it. Although actually I'm not sure that there are any additives that do either, but there are plenty that are in the 6 to 8 category. And then also if you have to look it up. Those are the simple rules that will help people be able to make healthier choices at the grocery store. And then from there, to begin to learn what are the things that are important to you, what are the changes that you want to make to eat food that is healthy and nourishing for your body and for your family.
So you don't have any favorite healthy convenience foods to suggest to our listeners?
Well, I will say, for example, one of my favorites is I love yogurt. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a big fan of brown cow, whole milk, organic yogurt cream on the top.
Oh, that cream on the top is amazing.
Awesome. So that's a great thing. I also am a big fan of oatmeal. And if you're going to eat oatmeal, obviously you want to make sure that you're getting it in a whole form. You don't want the quick oats. Those don't have as much fiber. They're not as nutritious for you. One of my favorite snack bars is called Raw Crunch, and it's a raw bar, and so I love those. And then, it's funny, sometimes when if I'm out running around and I'm hungry, I have been known to go to the grocery store, walk in, buy an apple, walk out, because I'm not going to go to McDonald's or Burger King or any of those places. I'm going to go to the grocery store, and I know I can get it and be out in 5 minutes. It's just the same amount of time that it takes you to go through a drive-through.
Yeah, the other day I was hungry, so I ran into Trader Joe's. I grabbed some salmon jerky and some sugar snap peas and just a bunch of nuts, and that was my lunch.
Absolutely. Well, and the big thing, too, is to know that you're going to be out and about. I actually have a little bento box type thing that I like to fill with snacks and take on the road with me. And like you said, it's got a little bit of protein in it, usually some kind of a nut mix. Maybe there's, a little cheese or something in there as well. And then to have some vegetables and some cut up fruit or whatever, just so that I've got some snacks to keep me going while I'm on the road.
Awesome. Well, Mira, you've gave some great tips, and I know if people want to find out about your book and where to get it, how can they get the book?
They can go to thepantryprinciple.net. That's my website, and they can get the book there. You can also go straight to Amazon and get it and look it up there. I'd also like to encourage people to sign up for my newsletter. If you go to thepantryprinciple.net, there's a sign-up sheet there. And when you do, you'll get a free copy of my ebook, Eating Out, Eating Healthy.
Ooh, yes, and I know I like to eat out and always looking for healthier ways to eat when I'm out and stay on track with my goals. So, well, thank you for that, and thank you for sharing your time with us and your expertise, and I'm sure we'll be in touch in the future.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and this has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Same here. Thanks, Mira.
Take care.
Hey, so I hope you enjoyed the show. That was Mira Dessy from thepantryprinciple.net. All the links and resources mentioned today are in the show notes at drann.com/007. And Ann is spelled A-N-H as in heart. While you're there, remember to jump on the Food as Medicine VIP email list, and you'll get my free gift, the Clean Eating Rules. It's everything I learned about nutrition when I was on my bodybuilding journey, and it's my #1 guide for how to eat to lose weight, improve your biometrics, and get more energy. You can get it for free at drann.com. You'll also get my favorite pearls from the show. I know the show can be a little bit technical and a little bit detail-oriented at times when the guests share their specific protocols about what foods to eat, what foods to avoid, which supplements to take, etc. And if you're anything like me, you're probably listening while you're driving, you're cooking, or doing some errands around the house, so you really don't have time to be jotting down notes of all the great information that's shared during the episode. So I've taken the notes for you, and by hopping on my email list, you'll get the show pearls delivered right to your inbox so you can refer back to them at any time. Finally, as a VIP email subscriber, you'll get the occasional love letters from me, emails sharing some of my favorite recipes and products, upcoming events, new information I've learned, and other goodies. So go to drann.com now and enter your name and email address. Did you like this episode? Then leave a review and tell your friends, because we need more people to hear the Food as Medicine message. We've got plenty of great guests coming up, so stay tuned. Thanks so much for stopping by, and until next time, remember to eat consciously, because the world needs a healthy and vibrant you. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends, because we need more people to hear the Food as Medicine message. And make sure to head over to drann.com and sign up for free updates, because I share some insights in my email updates that I don't share anywhere else. And before you go, don't forget to leave a comment, because I absolutely love hearing from you.